Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today will be New York Dore as we talk Vanderbilt baseball. We thank our sponsor, Wellspire, Nashville's Learning and Development Center. Wellspire offers personal and professional development opportunities in a beautiful facility in the Gulch neighborhood. Stop by for an event with world-renowned speakers or host an off-site event that will wow your team or your clients. We thank our co-sponsor, the Well Coffee House, which turns coffee into water and has a mission to bring clean water to the world. Our news is always presented by Sutherland & Belk, a Nashville-based injury law firm. Sutherland & Belk is committed to fighting for those who've been injured in car, motorcycle, and truck accidents. Check them out at sbinjurylaw.com. Vanderbilt and Arkansas start a 3-game baseball series, weather permitting. Friday's first pitch at 7, Saturday at 8, and Sunday at 1 o'clock. All those games, again, at Hawkins Field. Joining us now, our good buddy New York Dore, as we talk some Vanderbilt baseball. First of all, a shout-out to our Sean Williams, New York Dore. I don't know if you saw Yasiel Puig, who's been in the news a lot lately, about ran into the wall yesterday, running down a grab in right field, and Sean had texted me saying I was there and almost got run into by Puig. And sure enough, I'm looking on MLB Network this morning, and there's Sean's face. So shout out to Sean Williams. We're glad that you did not get flattened by Puig. That would have been bad for business.
Is that what we're now calling pulling a Kevin Ingram?
Yes, I think it is. I had a funny exchange with Kevin about that in the press box at Vanderbilt. I thought that was amusing. Kevin's got fame in his own right, but that was funny seeing him being talked about constantly during the NCAA tournament over that.
Yeah, for those that didn't see, first off, Kevin obviously is, along with Andrew Harris, broadcast video of the Vandy boys on ESPN Plus, and on top of that, during the opening round of, I actually don't remember, was it the NCAAs or the NITs?
It was the NCAAs. They played. Yeah. Who did they play? They got beat by Maryland, I believe.
Mm-hmm. And someone jumped directly into Kevin sitting on the sideline and lost his Diet Coke. No word on whether there was anything in the Diet Coke, but lost his Diet Coke but didn't lose his dignity.
It's funny. Jamie Erdahl did like a whole timeout thing on him, like Belmont play-by-play announcer Kevin Ingram got a Coke spilled on him and blah blah blah, and brought it. It's like, they usually spend the commercial break talking about what a coach said to his players in the huddle, and no, they talked about Kevin Ingram and his wardrobe malfunction or whatever you want to call it. So,
yeah, that's a
bad choice of phrase there, but you know what I mean.
And then, speaking of another malfunction, you and I were just discussing before we get into it. I wanted to express personal disappointment that, or scratching the head at the least, on Vanderbilt's decision to have Clay Travis throw out the first pitch of the Arkansas series. As you know, I don't get down to Nashville all that often, so I don't actually often see who's throwing out the first pitch. And I have no qualm with Clay Travis. He has a huge audience. His humor tends to be more crass, as is the case with most people with radio shows. I don't begrudge him that. I am just puzzled how a UT fan who has controversial positions and I think probably would himself say he's not family friendly, and who, yes, he has a tangential connection to Vanderbilt in that he was a graduate of the law school. And yes, I think he generally is positive and favorable in his insights relating to Vanderbilt, other than as per Tennessee. But, throwing out first pitch is a position of honor. And I just don't understand why we're elevating someone who is a successful a shock jock nonetheless. And, what I'd like to see is instead of that, every game where you don't have someone who actually is worthy of or who everyone in the audience can be proud of having a first pitch thrown out by, why don't you go a step further and have a parent of a player throughout the first pitch to that player every weekend. And I think that would be a great moment, and one which those parents who give so much to the program would cherish, and would really, really be a positive. I mean, I thought we had the last home weekend was fantastic. You had Derek Mason, you had Juwan Williams, you had Kyle Shermer throwing out first pitches, people who've done a lot for this university and represented this university extraordinarily well. I have no qualm with Clay Travis. I don't understand the logic of the invitation. And that goes not towards politics. I think you know me. I lean a little bit left, and Clay leans a little bit right. It goes to, when I bring my son down to his first weekend game, he's not going to be old enough to comprehend. But when he is, and he sees someone in a position of honor, I'd rather them not be someone who's also well known by most of the population for being crass towards women. And I'm just a little disappointed in that. And I am curious as to how the decision is made for opening pitch.
So who else is bothering you today, Jeannie?
Yeah, well,
I'm glad you picked up on that.
How was the play, Mrs. Lincoln?
Well, the play wasn't as great last weekend, but it's Georgia.
Yeah, but it is Georgia, and it's also baseball. Sunday, getting one hit, and first we'll add in the note that I was traveling this week, and I was in San Francisco, and I basically followed Sunday's game by getting text message updates from you and Mahaffey, and wasn't able. I was actually on a plane while it was going on, and Saturday I didn't really get a chance to watch much of it, and Friday I actually only caught the first 7 innings or so. So I didn't see a whole lot of the play this past week. Clearly the bats fell asleep. Clearly the spirit of Alonzo Jones rewoke them this past Tuesday night. But I wouldn't.
Can I stop you there? Did you see the Vanderbilt Twitter account after that game?
Oh, it was on fire. I'm actually wondering if they had Clay Travis take it over for the night in order to his compensation for getting to throw the first pitch.
Well, and if people didn't see it, they tweeted that the score was 15-3, which was the same that it was after the 7th inning, which I thought was, or whatever it was. I thought that was, I was a little surprised.
It was something to the effect of final score of 15-3, which is the same score if we had to roll it back to the 7th inning, which for those that don't recall, as a reference, 2 years ago, Alonzo Jones hit a grand slam in the 8th inning, somewhat maddeningly. And I remember live tweeting this, that swing at the next 3 pitches, get out immediately, because everyone knew a storm was coming. And to be honest, I think we actually bear a lot of blame on that, because I think someone took a walk after the grand slam. We should have been making every out as fast as possible and basically told the umps we didn't need any warm-ups and just get straight into playing the bottom of the 8th inning, because you could see it coming from a mile away. If you go back in 2 years in my timeline, if you can figure out how to do it, you'll see it all play out. As soon as Alonzo hits the grand slam, I'm saying make outs and get this game done, because everyone knew the storm was coming in. But at the same time, MTSU has full control. Once a game starts, the home team coach basically has full control of the situation, other than the umpires who make an immediate decision on whether or not to pull people off the field. But yeah, as you noted, it was clearly, I think, the Vanderbilt University baseball program is not sending a Valentine to Murfreesboro anytime soon.
Let's go right into the mailbag, which is sponsored by Vanderbilt fan Josh Minton of Brentwood. He's an insurance agent, so if you're in the market for auto, motorcycle, home, renters, and landlord insurance, or life or commercial insurance, you can call Josh at 615-933-1979. Email him at josh@hqinsurance.com. Follow him on Facebook at facebook.com/JD Minton HQ. He's my insurance agent. Hope you'll make him yours. Do us a favor for the program. Call Josh and just get a quote and see what he tells you. He may be able to save you a lot of money. Help Josh, help the program. So anyway, give that a try in your convenience or in your spare time. Ann Arbor Dore says, explain the drop ball rule. Can the ground cause a drop in baseball? Was it the right call? Of course, he's referring to the Stephen Scott play against Georgia, which I'm not sure if you saw or not, but I sure saw that on TV.
Yeah, I'll let you take this one because I didn't actually. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is a little bit like the football rule where you've got to make a football play afterwards to have a catch. You need to, what is it, the term that you need to make a football move after the catch in order for it to be a legitimate catch, which it actually goes. And I would refer back to, Jordan Matthews, Kalijah Lipscomb, and his near catch on 4th down at Notre Dame, where he has the ball, the ground makes contact with the ground, despite the fact that the ground can't force a fumble. The ground can prevent someone from collecting a catch, even if he has it fully in his possession. He's got to have his feet on the ground and make a football move. In this case, my understanding, and Chris, I'll let you take it from there, is, Scotty looked like he had made a catch, but hadn't, I guess, some component of corralling it, or the ball came out. I don't know, Chris. I didn't see it, so you tell me what happened.
Okay, from what I remember, and when I watch games on Sunday, a lot of times my wife is working, and I've got kids, and so I'm tuned in, but I'm not always tuned in 100%.
And David and Bella aren't yet at the age where they can appreciate watching Vandy boys baseball.
No, and David and Bella, if given the opportunity, will start a fight with each other. It's basically a given, like death taxes, and that's going to happen at some point when I've got them alone. But I watched it live, and I was confused. Again, I was a little bit distracted, but I was listening to the rule explained and watching what happened, and I didn't get it because Scott caught the ball. I mean, I think he had it for a good 2 seconds. I don't remember if it was when he was coming to his feet that it fell out, but I just remember watching and thinking that's a horrible call. And my memory may be a little bit off on that, but I did not understand at all how that was not a catch because I think he had control for a good 2 seconds.
Well, what's also a little bizarre about it is you have almost the reverse implementation of that in the transfer rule at second, where if someone loses the ball making a transfer on a throw to first, it's still deemed an out. Yet here, seemingly the same concept is determined to demonstrate that an out wasn't made. Or is it that, and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I'm missing something. He was not losing the ball because of trying to make a transfer. He just lost the ball. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't know. Again, I'm not going to swear my life on it that my interpretation was correct, but I will tell you one.
I'm not going to let you answer unless you put a blood oath on this, Chris.
Well, with that, we will end the podcast today. No, no. I mean, it was either one of those things where, like, if I was listening to what they said correctly and seeing it correctly with my eyes, then it was a bad call, and if not, it just violated common sense because I was 100% sure that he'd made a catch. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it could just be a bad call, and could be a rule that's. It sounds like it would be a rule that is so open to some component of interpretation. Obviously, someone's got to make a judgment as to when something's been fully controlled, but it's completely incongruous with the idea that someone can have a ball in his glove for 1/10 of a second at second base, and you call it an out just because he fumbles it trying to get into his hand. Yet at the same time, Scotty can have a ball in his mitt for 2 seconds. It dribbles out after being controlled, and somehow that's not an out. So I didn't see it, so I really don't have any input, and I haven't paid attention to diving into the rules So I'm useless. Sorry.
Yeah, my pet peeve in sports, and I'm looking at you here, NFL, is legislating common sense out of the rules. But that was my take on it. But anyway, Mr. Vandy says, does New York Dore think that the lack of hitting against Georgia is a concern, or was it due to the good Georgia pitching?
It's due to baseball. Again, I didn't see a whole lot. My understanding is, I don't remember if it was the Saturday game or the Sunday game, that there was a lot of weak contact, but there also was a decent amount of hard contact. I mean, Austin Martin had his worst week in his Vanderbilt career. But, I can point to probably like 3 different times he was robbed of doubles on really hard hit balls in the outfield. It's not like JJ Bleday was striking out every at bat. He had a lot of loud contact. It's just one of those days where, especially Sunday, where, few things go different and it's a, 3-2 win or something. And, you give credit to Georgia largely in the fact that they threw strikes. And even then, when you're looking at the Saturday game, I mean, it was hitting into bad luck. Vanderbilt was really forcing that starter to work. And it's a guy who hadn't really gotten very deep into any weekends, any SEC weekend starts. So you really were counting on the ability to do something against him. And Vanderbilt was putting out competitive at-bats. They just weren't getting results. And things go the other way. Like, we hit 9 home runs against Clemson less than a year ago. That should not happen, and it does not happen. And I would take getting 1 hit when you're, probably 1 for 20 in BABIP, something like that. I think they only had maybe 7 or 8 strikeouts. 1 for 20 BABIP, a .050 BABIP is bonkers. But it's no more bonkers than having 9 balls you hit hard go for home runs in a game against Clemson. So if we're willing to take the Clemson game where everything we hit is stung, or willing to take the Radford game where we're allowed to put Carson Fulmer in left field because it's that much of a joke, then we also have to be willing to deal with, getting no hit by Texas A&M a couple of years ago, or having that Rayo guy again, maybe on Sundays in Texas A&M, maybe are just bad for us, or getting 1 hit on Sunday. I don't think it's, yes, we've bizarrely struggled on hitting on Sundays so far this SEC season, and I don't think there's any rhyme or reason for it. And I don't think it's an issue of focus, but that would be the one thing I would look at instead of, am I disturbed that we're solid at hitting? Because at the same time I look and I see Julian Infante is starting to come alive and has 4 home runs in the last 2 weeks. That's got me excited. That's got me excited a whole lot more than losing 1 game because we get 1 hit and then turn around in the next game and pop 4 homers. I don't have any fear that we can't hit, because we've faced 3 of the top 4 pitching staffs in the league. And we have roughed up, 4 of the best arms in the league in Doxaxis. Help me out.
Doxaxis, I think.
He's probably Greek, and I can't even pronounce it.
Shame on you.
I'm a bad American hockey, I guess, half-breed. But, Doxakis, Lacey, Stallings. I don't think we really touched up Lingenfelter that much, but we did beat him.
Well, they hit Lingenfelter pretty hard. Christian Roa is the A&M kid that you're thinking about, by the way. Yeah.
And the Florida arms, which are, granted, we didn't rough them up any more than Ole Miss did, but those are first-round caliber arms, even if they're not getting first-round caliber production right now. I'm not scared that we can't hit. I think we just got beat. And it happens. It's baseball. This isn't football where a loss ends your season. Vanderbilt's number 2 or 3 in the RPI. I'm not worried at all. And if you look at the schedule, which is something I'm sure we'll talk about later, after this weekend, things tend to line up pretty darn favorably for Vanderbilt. And we should have an opportunity to really execute.
Yeah, I watched the series, and to me, watching Georgia was like watching a typical Tim Corbin team where they make all the plays in the field. They're going to strike you out and make you look bad on at bats. And when you hit the ball a lot of times, you're going to hit some weak grounders, which is a lot of what they did on Sunday. I think that was, yes, some of it may have been that maybe they weren't hitting their stride going down to Athens. They didn't hit particularly well most of the day against Western Kentucky till late. And so that was some of it. But I just watched that and thought, that's Georgia playing at an elite level.
And they're an elite team this year. And
yes,
it was
sort
of, I know over the last couple of years, we've sort of scratched our heads looking at Georgia because there's so much talent in that state. And they really have underperformed for, I don't know, 5-6 years. And but they were just a sleeping giant waiting for the right situation to arise. And they have, a great talent base, and that's showing out on the mound in particular.
Okay, Hardcore Dore says, with another error at MTSU, is it time to start trying someone else at second base? He's referring to Harrison Ray. Or do you think his offense, which I don't, carries him? Why not move Martin to second and then get Gonzalez's bat in the lineup? All three are about the same defensively.
So I think we have a quandary, and the quandary is, how do you position second and third base, and how do you do so once we get Pat DeMarco back in the lineup? And people, I think, sort of have forgotten about Pat a little because he's been out for 3 weeks now, and there's no definitive timeline for his return. I don't think there's ever been any official statement, but I think Joe said it was something like a quadricep injury, and those can be like hamstrings, something that you're sort of indefinitely day to day. Is that your understanding, Chris?
I think it's something like that. They're not specific with injuries, but I want to take a sidebar on that for a minute. I think what they're doing is actually really smart over the long term. I mean, I think, because I don't know all the details, but it seems to me like leg injuries in particular can linger if you don't let them get well. And they are giving other good players, we have said from the beginning, this was an exceptionally deep team, maybe his deepest ever, 1-35. They're giving some of these kids a chance to shine. They're not losing a whole lot in that. And I think they're ensuring, if what I think they're doing is what they're actually doing, is that they're going to be heading into postseason play with optimal health and knowledge of, hey, if we are able to stick this guy in a pinch, and there's the next question is about Isaiah Thomas, which is kind of where I'm going to go next. I just think that's a really good situation where their depth is allowing them to get guys fully well to not have to play through nagging injuries, and also establishing some confidence with some other guys when they're called in. I think that this really potentially sets up unbelievably well for them in postseason.
I agree with you in many ways. First, that this is the deepest Tim Corbin team, that the 10th best pitcher is actually number 36 on the roster, which is another bugaboo.
Oh, yeah, that's your Justin Willis pet peeve, yeah.
Yeah. But believe you me, I think we would have a few more wins on our ledger if Justin were on roster, but that's not my call to make, and I don't have all the information. But I think you're right, and I think we've had the ability to be more flexible in allowing people to get healthy, whether that was Austin Martin when he was down. We've seen Cooper Davis get some days off to make sure he's fully healthy in the midweek. We've seen Pat extended out, and more importantly, I think the point you make, which is not rushed back. Make sure he's actually healthy. And I think that next year people are going to be really pleasantly surprised. We're going to lose a lot of players to the draft this year and to graduation. But what we end up having next year has the potential to be a really, really strong team, largely on the basis of the amount of depth in the freshman class that's not seen playing time this year. Guys like Isaiah Thomas, guys like Jahan Malloy, Guys like Tate Kolowick and whatnot. There's a lot of talent on this squad. I mean, John Malcolm, another example, that is not playing. And basically, we're told at the start of the year, like, listen, don't expect a lot of playing time. We're going for a national title. You've got 4 seniors, a lot of experienced juniors who've established themselves in the lineup. Trouble getting basically 10 veteran or at least incumbent bats, and you can really make it 11 for the issue that we just discussed, is that they're basically 3 people trying to get playing time at second and third with Martin and Ray and Gonzalez. But you then have the quandary of how do you get Ty Duvall into the lineup. So there's not a lot of at bats to go around. It was really fun to see Zeke Thomas really show out on Tuesday, getting his first start and hitting a ball, just an absolute mile. And there was a couple of great tweets that were sent out showing, Ty Duvall, who twice walked in front of him, demonstrating to him how to do the plate stomp, and Zeke really getting into it. But he's an incredibly talented kid. I think he hit something like 370 or 380 and was named top prospect in the Futures League, which is a league which is populated by sort of lower level college baseball players and a handful of the top incoming freshmen. Vanderbilt probably had about 6 or 7 guys who played in the Futures League this summer. Max Stills also is another arm who's redshirting this year, who has a lot of potential for next year, sort of a Sonny Gray-sized kid with a Sonny Gray-sized arm. Not obviously as polished as Sonny was when Sonny was a freshman, but Max Stills also showed out in the Futures League. Dom Keegan, I think, had a good Futures League. So there's a lot of talent buried in the freshman class that is getting a year to season, and I think that's going to be incredibly beneficial for them as their bodies transform and participating in a full sort of professional caliber weight program, and they get to learn and catch up to the speed of the game at this level. And I think we're going to see a lot of kids who are redshirt freshmen or sophomores next year who are ready to make a significant impact because they've had the opportunity to basically apprentice for a year. What do you do at second and third? What are your thoughts?
I don't know. This is in the category of good problem to have. I don't trust Harrison's bat as much as I do some of the guys on the bench. At the same time, you see things from him time to time. No, the thing that bothers me about him is he will take some bad swings. His swings at times are the worst on the team, and he's sort of botched the routine play at times, but he also has probably a flair more so than anybody on the team, excepting maybe Philip Clark, and that's catcher's a different category of making the spectacular play. And again, he has been moved around. He's played third, so maybe you can make the case that if they keep him in there at second, he continues to get better and the routine plays start to come for him. I really don't have an answer. I mean, I've thrown questions out about that, but I don't know that I have a great answer. I mean, if I knew that Austin Martin could play second at a high level, I would be tempted to say put him at second and put Gonzalez at third because of the bat. But I don't know that I say that with any level of certainty. Do you?
I do not, because and let me give the caveat that I'm probably as big a Jason Gonzalez fan as there is in the fan base. I think he has such incredible upside. I think it's clear that he's demonstrated an incredible work ethic this offseason because he's improved so much defensively and at the plate. You can almost see some Vince Conde in his progression between freshman and sophomore year. And he adds a really big dimension at the plate too. I think he's a 370 hitter, which is somewhere around what he's hitting now. No, I don't. He's not. But can he be a 280 to 320 hitter and in a full season hit 15 to 20 home runs? Yes, I actually really do. And that's what I would hope to see from him next year. I will be honest in that I don't expect that, Harrison Ray's defense at second is going to be anything more than marginally worse than Jason's at third. I think Jason's going to make some errors. He's going to make some nice plays, but he's going to make some errors. Harry at second has been he has a flair for the dramatic. He's made some downright Kemp-esque plays at second, particularly going out into the outfield grass. But yeah, I think we're sort of in a really bad position in that we have no one who has the instinct for second base other than the guy we have to put at shortstop. And that's a problem. And I think it's probably more instinct than ability because, Austin Martin and Harry Ray have all the tools. The tools are there. They're just, I think Tim Corbin refers to them as outfielders we have in the infield. I think that's part of it. I think they just don't, they don't have it. Baseball's a very tough game, and baseball is a game of numbers, but it's also a game of anticipation and of knowing where to be, anticipating where you will need to be once you have the information that'll actually tell you to need to be there, and being able to make reads on a split second. It's the reason why 99.9% of us get weeded out before this level, because it's extraordinarily tough, and athletic gifts and genetics aren't enough. You have to have a feel for it. And that's also one of the reasons why, being a utility person or a jack of all trades, a Swiss Army knife, is such an exception, because you have to learn a position. And those positions can be extraordinarily different. It's one of the reasons why you don't see people be a bat and an arm going into the pro leagues, because it's just too darn hard to be able to get to the level you need to be to understand a position and have the instincts built up, and doing it at multiple positions at the same time. So, is there an opportunity for Harry to get comfortable at second base, or Austin to get comfortable at second or third? Yeah, that's certainly possible. But as of right now, I don't think it's a physical issue. I just think they don't have the instincts for it. They haven't learned the positions well enough yet. And that it may be asking too much of them. But the question is, again, when you're looking at it, what's the balance of making this team best overall on defense and offense as a collective, rather than looking at whether or not one person is a very good defensive player or one person is a very good offensive player. And it's one of the issues that we talked a lot about with Julian Infante, and sort of I've been harping on ever since our preseason podcasts, is that we're going to struggle on infield defense. Ethan Paul has been so much better than I expected. I think he was very good at shortstop, rather at second base last year after a very rough defensive freshman year. But moving from second to shortstop is not easy. Not everyone does a Dansby Swanson. It's a tough transition, particularly if you don't have like a cannon arm. He's more of a Brian Harris quick release arm, although he's got a better arm than Brian did. But he's been solid. But we've needed Julian Infante at first, because he's got the defense and the instincts to help the other infielders be good. And that's not a knock on Scotty at first base, but it's a positive for Julian. He's just a really good instinctual defender at first base. And he's also 6'5" with a huge wingspan, which doesn't hurt in his ability to get to balls. Now, earlier on in the year, one of the things that we were able to do was go into somewhat of a platoon at first base, with Scotty hitting against righties and Julian hitting against lefties. But you tell me, Chris, if Julian is starting to bring the power, and he's had better at-bats all year, he just only until recently is he starting to get the better results. And I think he was sidelined a little bit by concussion in weekend one. But I don't see a scenario where Julian's necessarily coming out of the lineup a whole lot now.
No, a lot of things to respond to there. To the Infante thing, yeah, if they kept him playing when he wasn't hitting the ball at all, then kept him playing when he's hitting the ball a little bit but not making hard contact, they are certainly not going to bench him now when he is making hard contact, and I wouldn't either. The rate thing, you made a great point about feel for the game. I think you kind of summed up what I was struggling to get to, is I think that's part of it too. He does seem to have a feel for second base that the other guys don't have. There are some growing pains there. And by the way, speaking of growing pains, a lot of the things that we have complained about all year are starting to sort of dissipate a little bit just as guys are getting more experience. One other thing that's occurred to me when we're talking about this, they're in good shape for next year. We're talking about all these bats on the bench that can't find playing time, and maybe some arms. Like you mentioned, Justin Willis didn't make the roster. I think now, a little too early to say, but my feeling now is this is, even with all these senior losses and maybe losing Clark to the draft, I do think this is probably going to be a preseason top 5 team next year. Let me get to our next question, which was about Isaiah Thomas. It's from JF Chat III. Says he looks like a potential baseball player. Is it too late in the year to expect him to find a place in the lineup, since the outfield, assuming DeMarco returns, will be too crowded? Could DeMarco or Thomas take over and left with Scott slotting in as the DH? Again, a very interesting question. The ripple effects, which that's kind of been the thing all year, is if you move one guy, that affects somebody somewhere else, is the fascinating part of this team and the thing that you have to resolve. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think we've seen a couple of times this year where freshmen have demonstrated during training sessions that they're on their game, and they've been rewarded with opportunities to get playing time. Early in the season, we saw that with Jahan Malloy getting a couple DH starts. We've seen that with Dom Keegan, who actually also really impressed in fall ball and February as a guy with a real potential power stick from the right side. And I think we've seen that with Isaiah Thomas here. I don't think it's going to be more than spot starts, particularly when Patty D comes back. And also Coop is going to be in on the weekend lineup unless he's really not feeling well. You might see starts in the midweek for guys being rewarded for good play and training sessions, but you're not taking Blade or Scott or DeMarco or Coop out of the lineup unless they're injured. And I don't foresee a scenario where any of the freshmen really break through for any meaningful playing time at this point. I mean, there are just guys ahead of them who have such a high level of ability, and more importantly, such a high level of experience and success on the most important stages. I guess you could argue that Coop Davis hasn't actually had that experience and success on the high stages prior to this year, but he's such just a dynamic ball player that he's not coming out of the lineup. He's basically Tony Kemp. I mean, that's what he is. Maybe not defensively, but at the plate and on the base paths, he's Tony.
Yeah, and the other factor is Ty Duvall is starting to hit like Ty Duvall has hit. So that's the other thing, is he's the guy that may get shoved out.
A line drive to the right fielder at the wall.
Yeah, although some of them started to fall. Here's another thing that just occurred to me. As much power as this team has, I'm looking at the home run totals. You got Blade with 14. You have nobody else with more than 5. You've got Clark has got 5.
I was thinking about that, earlier this weekend, or rather after this weekend, after Tuesday, when Julian hit his 4th, and I had to look up, and I'm like, is Julian second on the team in home runs? But I guess what is it? Ethan with 5.
Ethan's got 4. Clark has 5. He's second. Okay. But yeah, it's a lot of these guys, and this was the way someone mentioned that Scott's kind of a warm weather hitter. He's only got 3.
That's me.
Yeah, I guess it was you.
For 2 or 3 years now, that if you look at Steven Scott's history, he doesn't hit during the cold weather months, and then he was the best or second best hitter in the NECBL the summer between his freshman and sophomore year, after hitting like 220 for me. I don't know what his average was, but it wasn't impressive as a freshman. Sophomore year, he breaks his face in San Diego in the opening weekend. And that was like a literal, like he had a fracture in his face. So is that right, Chris? Am I remembering that right?
Yeah, I believe did he foul a ball off his face or something like that? I believe it was like a freak injury.
It was a foul ball. I don't know if it was a foul ball where he was the hitter or he was in foul play and got hit by a ball. And in batting practice. Whatever happened, but he was out and he never came around, and never really got the big season that I think he was hoping for and people were expecting. And then he turns around, he's on the Cape, and he's the first or second best hitter on the Cape in the summer between his sophomore and junior year. And then in his junior year, he's sort of middling until the last 2 months of the season, and he hit something like 9 home runs in the last 3 weeks. Or something like that, and ends up with 15 or 16 home runs for the year, which the thing about it is I think, after Pedro, DLO, and Westy, I think that's the fourth highest home run total for a Vandy boy in the Corbin era. And he did it basically all in the course of a month. I've said a couple times this season that, Steven Scott's hitting like this in February, March, and April. What the heck's he going to do when June and July comes around?
Bex4VU, this is a great question. Since pitch counts seem to be a major factor in how long pitchers stay in the game, why are warm-up pitches between innings not counted? Assuming these take a toll on the arm just like game pitches, perhaps a bad assumption, why don't they reduce the number of warm-up pitches to reduce fatigue? Now, I think there's an assumption in there that coaches don't consider that. I don't know if that's a right assumption or a wrong assumption, but certainly that's one that you never hear discussed.
I think if you talk to Keith Law, who's one of the biggest, Keith Law is an ESPN baseball analysis and they're sort of draft guru. If you talk to him, he's a big proponent of arm care and a big critic of most college pitching staffs. The exceptions to that include actually Vanderbilt. He's actually a very big proponent of Derek Johnson and Tim Corbin, and now the way Scott Brown handles pitchers as being a program that manages arm care and with very rare exceptions will break any sort of the unwritten rules of treating arms well, which would be, setting a cap on some sort of pitch count and not bringing people back on short rest. Under most circumstances, there are exceptions to it from time to time, obviously. And Keith will say, it's not just a pitch count. It's also how many throws are you getting in between innings? How many throws over to first you have? But also he'll acknowledge that not all throws are equal. So a high stress throw is going to be more on the arm than a bases empty, low stress throw. And certainly, it's not as bad to be making a warm-up pitch than otherwise. But as far as shortening warm-up pitches, as a guy who threw in high school, never blew out my arm actually throwing a one-hitter. In my senior year, I was not going to play at Vanderbilt when I got to campus, but I had thoughts of possibly walking on to another school I was looking at. And I will tell you, as someone who threw in high school, the in-between innings pitches, you don't want to limit those. That's you getting loose. And you want to be stretching in between innings, and you want to be, working your way back up to being hot with warm-up pitches before you throw. So I think you'd be increasing injuries if you cut off warm-up pitches rather than doing something different, rather than conserving energy. That's kind of like, I think Donald Trump said something to the effect of, the reason why he doesn't jog is that we're born with a finite set of energy and he doesn't want to use it up on that, which makes me wonder what he does want to use it up on. But neither here nor there. This isn't a politics podcast other than our Clay Travis bashing.
Well, I think your arm difficulties, that was God preordaining that Vanderbilt needed an unofficial tweeter, right?
That's correct.
This is another great one that I've wondered about. Bryce Drew Lover 69 says, thoughts on Jackson Gillis? Is there an injury concern here, or is his lack of time on the mound simply a result of being behind King, Eater, and Fisher? I have to think that is, if it's not an injury, it's a not totally ready to throw type of thing, because he's too good an arm to have only thrown 5 innings at this point. And again, they're not going to comment on it, but that's how I size it up.
So I'm trying to figure out how best to say this, other than my understanding is that he is physically healthy people have to understand that pitching at this level involves a lot more than physical health. And it involves everything from confidence in physical health to confidence in your stuff to just feeling good. And my understanding of the situation is that Jackie has most of those going for him, but that everything hasn't clicked. And it's not the yips, but it's not fully dissimilar from that. But I don't know that from official sources. I don't know that from anything more than what I'm looking at and being told that it's not a health issue. Sometimes just it's a confidence issue. My understanding is that he's fully healthy. There's not an injury at play here. He is not coming at it with the killer attitude that he had his first 2 seasons. Now, I also want to caveat that people tend to focus on his pitching in the Clemson Regional 2 years ago, where he came in and he just was filthy, just blowing it by guys at 94, 95, striking out people with near immaculate innings. And that's really not been the full story for him throughout his years. He's been a guy who's had a high walk rate, who's been very good and generally reliable, but far from a perfect pitcher. Is this like Mariano Rivera suddenly becoming something significantly less than Mariano Rivera? No. I think it's something where when Jackie is ready to attack the zone and is feeling good, my hope would be that we'll see a lot more of him. He's still considered a very high draft prospect, which is good. But again, my understanding is that there's not an issue at play here.
Last one from Vandy Creed says, on a lighter note, your favorite nicknames on the current roster and your favorite all-time nicknames.
I learned that Kiambu has a fun nickname, which is Boo, which brings me to one of my favorite nicknames indirectly that I've given a player, which was indirectly because Boo, I said it sounds way too much like Boo Boo, which is Andrew Harris. Why is Andrew Harris Boo Boo? Because he's the younger brother of Ouch, which was Brian Harris, who I coined the hashtag Ouch for him because he set the record for hit by pitchers in a season, an NCAA record that was tied but still stands. As far as the best nicknames on this roster, I would go with, I think Pat DeMarco has a really fun one, which is Patty D, defensive replacement, Kiambu Fentress.
No Pat the Bat?
Patty D, defensive replacement. I like that one. As you can tell, I'm still not bitter about that defensive replacement about 4 or 5 weeks ago. There are some interesting ones. Apparently, Tyler Brown is quite good at the dugout nicknames. I did learn recently that Austin Martin prefers Amar to Amart or Marty. But as far as the guys on staff, there are a lot of them. There's some that are inventive. If I had to go with what's my favorite all-time Vandy Boys nickname, I still think Flash was a pretty good one for Ryan Flaherty.
Where did that come from? I just remember that being a thing, and I don't remember the origin.
It wasn't from his speed.
Well, I know that, but
we had a lot of fun also with Tony Kemp hashtags. We had a lot of those, but I will say the best. I wouldn't call it a nickname because it's way too long to be a nickname, and I'm just pulling it up right now, so I'll get it right. There is a Twitter user by the name of Train Island, which is Christian. I'm forgetting what his name is, but a former writer, I think, for The Hustler, who referred to Stephen Scott as looking like what you would expect if a magical witch suddenly granted arms and incredible baseball powers to a fire hydrant. And so every time Stephen Scott comes to the plate now and does something good, I have this image of a dancing fire hydrant. And if you follow me tweet, you'll see that quite a bit.
I have a general pet peeve over baseball nicknames. They are very unoriginal. It's usually your first initial of your first it's your first name initial and then followed by like the first 3 or 4 letters of your last name, like Amar or Amart. It's just, there's no creativity like there was 100 years ago with nicknames.
Yeah, and here's the full quote from Christian DeAndrea back in June 3rd of 2018. So that would put it somewhere around the Clemson series, I think, last year. But Stephen Scott is really showing us what a fire hydrant given life by a benevolent witch can do once it figures out how to use its arms. And I think that's the best tweet that anyone has made about Vanderbilt baseball in my time on Twitter.
Yeah, that's outstanding. All right, New York Dore, we are going to end the podcast today. Thanks for joining us, and I'm looking forward to doing this again next week. Should be a great series with Arkansas if it gets played, and lots of great baseball coming down the stretch. The thing that's going to be fun about the SEC, there's just not an easy out anywhere in any series for anybody. You could maybe say Kentucky, which Vanderbilt has remaining on its schedule, but really such competitive baseball, even from the bottom end teams. I think this finish is going to be super interesting.
Yeah, are we getting some weather?
Oh
weekend?
Yeah, we are. It rained here in the Nashville area this morning. I think it may have stopped for the time being, but it's supposed to come in again, I think, in the AM hours on Saturday. It's supposed to stop, last I checked, around first pitch Saturday night, but I think it's going to resume again. So I don't know if Sunday's game is the one in jeopardy, but either way, these things aren't always accurate, and there's a lot of rain in the forecast in bits and pieces this weekend.
Yeah, well, that's the beauty is we have a slip and slide that drains well. But as you noted, I think it's going to be, if you look at Vanderbilt's upcoming schedule, it does. We've played after this weekend. We've played the significantly difficult series that we've had. This is going to be, the fifth straight top 25 weekend. If you go by the polls, I think one poll had Tennessee as a top 25 team 2 weeks ago, but you had Texas A&M, you had Florida was a top 15 team when we played them. Tennessee was at the periphery of top 25 when we played them. Georgia was top 5. Arkansas is top 10. And then after that, we go to Tuscaloosa, and Alabama's having a good year, but they're not top 25. Auburn comes and visits Nashville. They're having a very good year. They're number 19 currently, but, they're not a top 10 squad. We're going to South Carolina after that. South Carolina has struggled some. Then we have the midweek with Louisville, which is having a nice season somewhat unexpectedly. They must have found another Birdie brother to close. And then we've got Missouri coming to Nashville. Missouri is a dangerous squad in that they have one of the best pitching staffs in the country, but they really don't do much on offense or defense. And then we go to Kentucky to close the season. Kentucky's really having a disappointing year, only 18-15. They do have an outstanding starter on Friday night, but after that, it's been a little bit more down than up for them. So it's definitely a schedule that was front loaded as far as the elite teams. In hindsight, Florida's not looking as good as one would have expected, but still, after this weekend, you can't cruise in the SEC, but Vanderbilt has a strong position to finish strong, which we'll need to, because we're only +2 right now in the SEC record, and to get a host spot and preferably a national seed, we'd like to be at least +6, +8. The positive is we're working with a really strong RPI, and that's not going to be hurt in any sort of significant way. Alabama comes in with an RPI of 46, Auburn at 14, South Carolina at 50, Missouri at 27, and Kentucky at 43. So there's going to be a strong. This schedule was very well constructed for Vanderbilt to have a very good case for a regional host and a very, very strong good case for a super regional.
Thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure.
He is New York Dore. I'm Chris Lee, the host of the Vandy Sports Podcast. Make sure to go to vandysports.com. Take advantage of the free trial we're running until August. Thanks for listening to the podcast. We'll be back more with episodes again next week.